Welcome to The Screen Queen, where I'll be talking about your favorite movie or your favorite TV show. You'll just have to listen to find out. Here is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there, and welcome back to the show. As always, my name is Samantha Parrish, and you are listening to the host on the East Coast, The Screen Queen. Back in 2019, there was a fresh batch of films getting ready to go for a big theatrical release that didn't happen because of the pandemic. When it comes to the films that we get in the beginning of any new change, it can stick out and be the best or worst thing. There are some films I remember that came out at the beginning of the pandemic that went well, and some didn't. And Swallow just kind of faded into obscurity. But then when I got the chance to watch Swallow, it did not turn out like I thought it was going to. This film did the hugest 360 on me, and most of that was due to how it was marketed. Swallow was marketed as a hard horror film, but when I saw it, it was more of a psychological drama film. So there was a lot of pros and cons already before even seeing the film. However, there's a lot this film had to offer that makes it worth talking about. But before I get into the episode, I do need to give a discretion that this episode is going to be having mentions of narcissistic abuse, Pica, and sexual assault. And I will be placing time codes during some of this episode where you can find a place to skip. I don't want my listeners to walk into an episode and not be given any fair warning. And I like that when other content creators provide that, and I want to do the same. So with that said, you're about to find out why I said this is a tough film to swallow. This is Swallow. So as always, I like to give a synopsis about the film because I never assume that everyone knows what I'm talking about. Swallow is the story of a young housewife named Hunter. She went from living the blue-collar life to never having to worry about cooking, cleaning, or anything. And then, Hunter has great news. She's pregnant with her first child. Except this is not a happy pregnancy. From the pressures of her in-laws and the narcissistic pressures of her husband, Hunter starts to develop an appetite for inanimate objects, and she can't get herself to stop. But she also doesn't want to stop. The worse things are at home, the more her appetite increases, and this begs the question, how far is Hunter's appetite going to go? It's kind of impossible to forget a premise that has to do with a woman that develops an insatiable appetite, and we've had films like that before. I would almost say it kind of feels like a modern-day version of Rosemary's Baby. When you marry something together like maternity and morbidity, there are endless options. The trailer felt so oblique. I'm like, oh God, do I even want to know what she's going to eat? So the marketing made it really amped up, but didn't turn out like I thought it was. This was not a horror film at all. For the hell of it, I did my research. I went on every place that Swallow was mentioned, and all the genres said drama, psychological drama, one said psychological thriller, and I'm like, okay, well, I know it's psychological, but this seems like a mixed genre film. When I was talking about this episode with my friend Dan, I explained the premise of the film, and he had said he also heard of it as well, and I knew where he heard it from because he also thought that it was a horror film too. I wouldn't say that the original marketing was wrong for this film, and I don't want to label this as a horror film or a drama film. I would ultimately leave that up to the viewer of the film and see it however you want to. I always say in every episode, you choose how you want to be entertained. So you choose how you want to define this film. When I walked away from this film, and oh boy, there were a whole bunch of times I almost walked away from this movie, I was experiencing something that was way more than what I bargained for. To be honest, this film, it's like mental health bingo. I gave my hard warning at the beginning of the episode for a reason, because every time I went to continue this film, it just like more stuff piled on. First it opens up with gaslighting, then you see the narcissistic abuse, and then comes the medical condition of Pica, and then there's more abuse, and then you find out the family abuse, and then you find out about what happened to Hunter and the reason why she was born as a product of rape. Oh my god, it just kept going. However, I did feel that the film correctly identified the mental health issues. I would say that this is a film that does have some precautions, but you can see how the film was cautionary around all of the topics. There was a lot of homework that went into this film. As someone who went through a verbally abusive relationship, and unfortunately, I can recall the many nasty things that were said to me in that relationship, the fact that I can say most of the dialogue in the film matched the various terrible things that was said to me, I felt that the director made an accurate depiction on what that looks like when someone goes through a narcissistic abusive relationship. And with the premise of this film surrounding a woman that is going through a medical diagnosis of Pica, and the way her husband is not being considerate to it, it's a harshness, but it does show what people go through in those situations. It's rare that I can say that there's a film that I can reference to explain to someone what I went through in my relationship. Like I said, they did their homework very well. Within the beginning of the film, I knew very quickly that this was going to be an uncomfortable time. There are some films that you watch and you prepare yourself. I was prepared for an uncomfortable film. And oh boy, were there moments that I had to pause because I just had to take in what had happened. It's very similar to what happened in my experience of watching The Nightingale, when I had to just take a moment and digest what just happened, but then also check my vibe to make sure that I was okay. Halfway during the film, I debated just not finishing it. I was like, I waited for this film. It wasn't what I thought it was. I gave it a shot, and I'm seeing some things that's a parallel in my life, but I pushed through, and honestly, I'm glad that I did. And after I successfully sat through this film, I can officially share the notes that I took about this film, because, oh Lord, there's a reason why I called this film Mental Health Bingo. Now, I have talked about films that have to do with domestic abuse before. Many of you might be familiar with my episode about Frankie and Johnny and the character of Frankie dealing with domestic abuse. And now here's a character like Hunter, where it is an unfortunate situation that you do see what her future is going to be like, and you see how things continually get worse for her character. Every time I progressed through this film, I just sat there and I'm like, oh, it's just getting worse. And it's unfortunate to say that we've said that about someone in our life, when you see that they're with someone they shouldn't be with because of the mistreatment that happens to them. A lot of the things that happened to Hunter, in the way that I was practically yelling at the TV, it was very similar to the way that most of my friends have also voiced their concerns about when I was in my relationship. Hunter's marriage to her husband, Richie, it is unfortunately one of the most accurate depictions I've seen of a verbally abusive relationship. There were many times I had to pause the movie and just go, okay, that's familiar, but I kept going. This was a film that knew how to show something alarming without overdosing the audience, and I really appreciate that, especially for someone like me that has to play it safe when it comes to films that deal with things that could trigger me. I felt the discomfort. I felt the stiffness to it. Seeing the red flags that her husband Richie has, the way that it was obvious and not obvious at the same time, where there's a certain way that people can be abusive without saying certain context clue words, which is why I still push to say this film is kind of like mental health bingo, because of the way that it does accurately depict something. There's a part in the film that just sealed the deal for me to see even more of the narcissism, is when Hunter is going to therapy because of the Pica. Obviously by her husband that was like, you just need therapy. I'm not going to listen to you. Ugh. And Hunter finds out that doctor-patient confidentiality was not respected, as she overheard her therapist on the phone with her husband, and she hears her own private information being told to her husband, and the way that her information is being told as if it's gossip and not that it's serious. There is no context in Richie's conversation with the therapist that he cares, which shows even more of the narcissism, because narcissisms do not care about the context of how alarming it is. They just want to know how they can fucking use it to their advantage. And unfortunately, in this case, with the marriage of Richie and Hunter, it just was not meant to be, because of how Richie would rather do everything he can to make his wife perfect than to build a perfect life with Hunter. It is shocking, sad, alarming, unfortunately, not uncommon. I could very well see something like that happen in real life, with someone narcissistic trying to bribe an official to get information, because they would not want to learn that organically. There's nothing organic about narcissism. It's all about the power play. But unfortunately, looking at Richie's character, it was bound to happen to any of the girls that he was going to be with. You can see that this is not the first time that he's done this to a woman. Everything he says is very seasoned in the way that this is not the first time he's had to make someone feel bad for doing nothing wrong. With the way that I saw the relationship between Hunter and Richie, it did parallel the previous relationship that I had with my ex that I call Butthead. And as much as there was an obvious discomfort, I didn't feel triggered. I felt that I was watching something that equivalated to what I went through, and seeing how Hunter did all of the things that I did. And did everything to be a good wife, was told to not say anything, but then found my own information wasn't being respected. It was such a strong parallel. There's another scene that I want to highlight where Hunter is told to not talk about what's going on in the marriage. However, everyone else knows, because Richie's been blabbing it to people and giving his version to everything, and Hunter is reasonably mad. So this dude is going around and telling everybody that she has Pica than actually working with her Pica. Everything about his character makes me mad. And he's like, what am I supposed to do? I didn't have anyone to talk to. And it's like, fucking help her? That's what you're supposed to do. Oh, that was the moment in me where I'm like, I don't know if I can stay. But as much as that scene made me mad, I didn't want to just abandon the film quite yet. I knew I had to stick around for it. But that does bring me to my next point in this mental health bingo, and it's honestly why I got the title. The Pica. So, before I go into my commentary about that, I do want to give a preface that I am not the most knowledgeable about it. I did like a crash course learning about it during this film, but I wouldn't say I'm the best person to rely upon for this information. I would highly encourage you to go to a professional. So I believe this is absolutely vital that I explain what Pica is. Pica is a disorder where someone is compelled to eat inanimate objects. Sometimes they do it absent-mindedly, sometimes it happens knowingly. This might sound like an oddball reference, but the show My Strange Addiction, that could also be associated with Pica in some terms. I don't want to entirely count that as a reference because I know there are some holes in that being a reality show, so it's kind of like a half footnote to say. So I'm going to reference the trailer again. The trailer did not indicate that this was related to Pica. I thought this was just a film in the same guise of the film Grace, where the baby is looking for other things to eat and the mother had to provide that. Or Rosemary's Baby, is it going to go in the Satanic Story venture? It was inconclusive on what the angle was going to be. I would have never thought that it was Pica. This film truly felt like a learning experience of a medical diagnosis, and usually some films that are centered around a medical diagnosis, it can be a little half and half, where you don't know where the dialogue of the film is going to suit the medical condition and not feel too stiff, that you are learning about this for the first time, just like we all do through certain medical conditions when you interpret it in your own way. And I kind of like how organic it made the medical condition sound, that it could be understood. Hunter is learning about all of this for the first time, and it feels like we're learning about Pica for the first time, and I like how it presented Pica like that. For someone like me that doesn't grasp a lot of medical concepts, but you always look for certain things that can make the definition for you. And oftentimes when we see medical conditions depicted in the media, we have to take it with a grain of salt because we don't know how accurate it is. While I was watching the movie, I did look up Pica, and I did see how everything felt accurate to what I was reading. So it's nice to say that this film did a good job teaching me something that I wouldn't have known, and now I can reference this film and say, yes, it does know what it's talking about. And then when I was talking about this film with my friend Ams and discussed Pica with them, they told me this, that very rarely pregnant women do develop Pica. This is more of like a 20-90 chance, so I didn't want to say like it happens half the time because they didn't say it happens half the time. Hence why they highlighted that it was a rare case. But it happens enough for it not to be forgotten that some people know about that. Which is good. I'm still new to it about learning what Pica is. And this is how I learned about Pica. The way that Hunter has that fixation onto these objects and can't help herself, I could be able to see what this could be like for some people. It didn't overdose all this knowledge because it kept it pretty fair, that it gave you just the amount of stuff and to go from there. I like how they didn't depict this as like, for lack of a better words, a terrible thing, because in her eyes, this is normal. She sits on the bed and she's eating soil or she's eating a marble. And when she keeps like this collection of the stuff that she's eaten, and it's like this happiness she has because it's the one thing she has control over. That's my takeaway. She has no say in anything in her house because her husband always overrules her or undermines her or dismisses her because he's gross, or her in-laws that are constantly trying to get her to change. This is the one thing that she has. It's extremely sad, but when you understand the motives of why people do what they do, it starts to be more understandable. It doesn't feel so damning once you know what they're doing, and then there begs the question, well, what can you do about it? So in Hunter's case, you're not really given the answer that she's cured from Pica, and I kind of like how they left it open. The thing with mental health is that you have to want to do it for yourself, and that could take time. It could be weeks, years, who knows how long, because it's ultimately up to their decision. And Hunter's going to have to come to that conclusion on her own, and I'm glad that they left that out. The last thing you see that she does associated with Pica was eating soil on her bed, and then I didn't see anything else after that. And yeah, it's a little inconclusive, but that's the way it is with some people. You never know when help is going to come. I'm a big fan of films that leave out that ending because it feels a little bit more rooted in reality. Even though we go to movies to escape things, it's also nice to see how we can immensely parallel with something in our own life. At least that's my takeaway from it. Hopefully things work out for Hunter in the future, and that's kind of what the film alludes to be. Can't speak for all people that have had Pica because I'm sure they have had very different situations, unlike Hunter in the film, or maybe unfortunately similar to Hunter. But Hunter's story involving Pica, it does highlight what some people go through for that. It made me more open to learning about that. It also made me open that if I do ever meet someone someday, I will at least know what they're talking about. And I wouldn't have known about that if it wasn't for this film giving a crash course on what that's like. And then there's the last thing about this movie that I wanted to mention, a part of the mental health bingo. And honestly, I'm a little bit nervous talking about it because it's not easy to talk about. But the way it was handled in the movie still gets to me, and you'll see why I'm having a bit of a weird time talking about it. So, in the film, it's revealed that Hunter's origin of birth is very dark. She is a product of rape, and she has kept tabs on her father. In the last part of the movie, she decides to get her answers about her father. It has nothing to do with her Pica. This is mostly just Hunter's evolution at this point, that she's taking control of her life again. And so she finds her father, and her father is prepared for this moment. At first, Hunter shows up, and she kind of lies her way into the house and says that she's like a guest of the house. And then she lets it be known very quickly to her father that this is going to be an unexpected family reunion. And so her father prepares for it, and he goes, all right, do you want money? What do you need? And she said, I want answers. And he went, all right, ask away. And so she does. She asks him why he did it. And he said, because I thought I was hot shit. And then I went to prison, and I learned that I wasn't. Hunter's father then goes on to explain how he came to realize what he had done. To actually put himself in the shoes of someone else when it happened to him. So basically, he had a hard, heavy hand of karma for him to realize what he had done. But with the way he talks about it, it's clear that this is something that's been on his mind for quite some time, that this is not going to be fixed with a I'm sorry or I learned. It's a I live with it. Whenever we get stories from the rapist, it's usually, oh, well, did you see what they were wearing? Or I just didn't know what I was doing, blah, 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 excuses. But he didn't give any excuses. Hunter's father doesn't dismiss the feelings, but he also doesn't do this compare and contrast to say that what he went through in prison was as bad as him doing the sexual assault against her mother. He didn't do that comparison, and I kind of like that he did that. It does show more that he has had a lot of time to think about what he's done and accepts the consequences of his actions, that he had to go to prison, not because of the fact that it's a fucking crime, but that he has learned his lesson in a way that is going to follow him the rest of his life. He's getting his life put back together, but is not going to expunge what happened, because that is a part of his life now. Just like how this story about him and Hunter's life has been surrounding hers. And now here is this moment for both of them to give everything on the plate. But it's the way that this scene ends that still gets to me. Hunter asks her father, am I going to be like you? And he said, no, absolutely not. I don't think so. And I like it as a fatherly thing that he said, but to also assure her that she is in control of her own life. She's going to make better decisions. Even though this is the first and maybe hopefully not last time that they're going to see each other, but that's kind of left up in the distance, is that you don't know if Hunter is going to maintain a relationship with her father. I mean, given the fact that there's no easy way to develop a relationship, but in a way it was kind of like closure. She got her answer. She didn't get something damning. She didn't get something terrible. She got what she needed. And then in turn, her father does a fatherly thing to give her some comfort. It's a weird scene to talk about, and I hope I gave it justice because it sounds strange to have to say, but it's a scene that you don't normally see about. And I can definitely see this being dissected by other psychologists and this whole thing, and they can probably talk about it miles better than I can, but that's my takeaway from it. That it doesn't ignore the pain of what happens to people being a product of rape and the seeking of closure, seeking of answers, and I thought it handled it well. That ultimately is what saved the film, but also I want to highlight that dialogue was said by the great, amazing, and wonderful Dennis O'Hare, who has had a lot of work in the drama and horror industry, as he's mainly known for American Horror Story. He saved the film for me. I stayed to watch him, and I'm glad that I did. But I also feel like there's no one else that could deliver that dialogue in a way that truly made you believe what he was saying. That this was a man that had done a terrible action and showed how he thought about it and how he's going to live with it the rest of his life. The acceptance as well as the accountability within that statement without sounding shallow. Just, man, it was a lot. This film was like a roller coaster. That's honestly why I call it mental health bingo, because you never knew what you're going to expect. So I didn't have a proper segue for this, but I happened to spot this in my notes, and I didn't want to forget to talk about it. So the director of this film and writer of this film is Carlo Mirabella Davis, and that might not be a name you know, but I think this will be a name you'll know in the future. This man is attached to the series Savant from M. Night Shyamalan, so when I looked up his name, I'm like, oh, no wonder this film feels very deep. It just kind of has some Shyamalanian little snippets to it that I'm like, ooh, yeah, this makes sense. So as much as M. Night Shyamalan can make really weird films, at least his imprint on other people is getting places. But I'm glad they chose someone that correctly put this stuff out there. If this is a man that worked on Savant, then I definitely think this is a director that knew what he was doing in this film. But in all the harshness of the film, there is a good side to this. Because for the most part, you're sitting with the ugliest people you would ever meet. You probably have already met some of the characters in this film with how much it makes this contrast reality to a toxic household. And then there's this character named Lua, or Lue. I honestly do not know how to pronounce his name, and it's been a hot minute since I've seen the movie, so I don't remember how to pronounce his name. But he serves as the caretaker for Hunter. And he's mostly there for, like, surveillance purposes by Richie, so that way she can be stopped before she eats something else and, you know, embarrasses him because, God, it would be terrible if something embarrassing happened to Richie, like the fate of his wife. Oh my God. And so Richie hires Lue to make sure that she doesn't eat anything. However, in his job, he doesn't agree with everything that's going on here. He's mostly there to make sure that Hunter falls in line, that she doesn't eat anything bad, but at the same time, he doesn't push her on certain things. There's a scene where Hunter has just had her stomach pumped and she's been verbally abused and she is just taxed. So she hides under the bed, and he says, Miss, I need you to come out. Miss, come on, I need you to come out. And she goes, no. And he went, okay. And so he just gets under the bed with her and just lies there and says nothing. Now, I looked at that scene and I'm like, I wish they said something. But that was kind of like my inner fan fiction person going, oh, there could be a conversation here. But silence speaks louder than words. This is the first time you actually see someone decent in this film. Everyone in this film was like the picture-perfect definition of terrible, to the point that you could look up terrible in the Oxford Dictionary and just find a picture of these family members. And then you have him just being decent to her. It's not a lot of decency, but it's just enough that you have a moment to breathe. Hunter has a moment to breathe. And then it comes up later on. Hunter is about to be sent to a psych ward because, naturally, no one should listen to Hunter, as if she doesn't know what she's talking about, and she knows her life is going to be obliterated. So she packs up her stuff and she's going to make a bolt out the door. But then Lue stops her and is like, Miss, you have to go. I've been sent to get you. And she's like, please, please. And he stops. He doesn't do anything, but it holds just enough to realize that he's not on board with what this family wants. And the next thing you see is the family's coming inside and they're just like, where the hell's Hunter? And he's like, she's in the bathroom. And they go in the bathroom and find all the faucets are on and the door is open and she bolted. This man guaranteed her safety. If it wasn't for him, who knows what would have happened to Hunter. So again, even though he's a character that doesn't say much, but it's what he does that makes him stand out in this film. I could have seen him be this big brother figure to tell her the raw truth that she's looking at her future staying with Richie. He could have told her that the best thing for her was to get out. He could have asked her why she eats all these inanimate objects. I feel like there was so much potential to really have like a solid conversation about understanding someone else's pain. And in a way, they kind of do emote the fact that they understand each other in a way of just having this person that's not too close with Hunter, but cares enough about her that it's the only thing we get to having someone care about this character. But then there's the ending of this movie that, well, it's not much of an ending, but it's not bad. It just ends with Hunter aborting her child and going on with her life. You don't really know what happens to her, and I kind of like that they didn't give us a dramatic conclusion. They just gave it like a realistic conclusion that this is now Hunter's new beginning. The ending is her new beginning. We know she talks with her father. We know she escaped Richie. But we never know what happens with her Pica. And I'm kind of okay with that. When it comes to mental health, we don't really get an answer. There are people that still probably deal with it every day, and they have to deal with their own terms. You know that Hunter is no longer in the relationship, so it's not going to be as severe as it was. And the fact that she's just navigating life by herself, you know she's going to be okay. You know that she's got her control back in her life, and maybe that'll lead to her controlling her Pica in the future. It's a film that doesn't feel that it's closed off, but it feels just open enough that you can make your own interpretations. And I like the film for that. It does feel very educational. It does, oh boy, deliver a lot on the psychological department, to the point that I feel this is a film that you could show people in a psychology class and they won't get triggered, but they'll have a good definition on what it looks like if they're trying to define some of things like Pica, people who are a product of rape, or domestic abusive relationships. I mean, you can do anything with this film. So I wouldn't say that this is a film that you can watch all the time, but I would say it is worth one time. As much as the plot of the film is kind of half and half, again, that's what keeps it open, is that you can kind of fill in the gaps in some places. It doesn't feel like cheap writing, because the writing is very good with what they did for the psychological information. It's a film that just didn't really get the right spot coming out the pandemic, but I think it's going to get new life in a couple of years. So if you think you can swallow the stuff in this film, then I would say it's worth it. And that's a wrap on the episode. Thank you for swallowing this episode with me. This turned out way better than I thought it was going to. Just like the film, so I guess I walked into the same outcome like I did with the film, where it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But I like how it turned out. So now is the time to find out what the next episode is going to be on The Screen Queen. So if you're new to the show, welcome. You walked in at a very intense episode. Thank you for bearing with it and swallowing it. So here we go. I have a box full of suggestions, and we all find out together what the next episode is going to be. I love it for us. It's so special. So let me mix this up really well, because I put some new stuff in here. Let me have nothing fall out again, please. Okay, let me pick from the bottom. Okay, I have like 10,000 in here. What are you? Show me your secrets. Who are you? Please be an easy one. I would really like that. Okay. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not good, but I'll take it. You'll find out why I say it like that. So the next episode on The Screen Queen is going to be Roseanne. Yep. We're going there. You'll know why on the next episode. So thank you so much for being here. If you want to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. And if you would like to listen to me on another outlet, I am now available on YouTube, and you can catch me on there. And if you're interested in the dark humor crime series that I wrote called Inglorious Inc., you can find that bad boy in the description box. Alrighty. You all take care now. Stay amazing. Take care of your mental health. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye! So before I go, I actually have a blooper to share with you guys. During the recording of the episode, my diffuser went off, and I had the most stupidest terrible reaction to this, but I also couldn't help but share it, so I kind of just wanted to leave this episode with like a palate cleanser to get a good giggle. It is disgusting how he is bluntly ignoring how to help her. All he did was shove her into therapy just to get what he needed, as opposed to, how dare you turn off like that? How the ever-loving dare you do that? Think about your mistakes, diffuser.